How does a simple family dinner end with my son's father-in-law putting his hand on him and pushing him while his own daughter thanks him for it? Why did they think I would just sit there and accept it, like every other time they treated my son as if he was a guest they could lecture? That night, when I stood up from the table and made a phone call in their hallway, they still had no idea who I really was or what I could do to them the legal way. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Henry Lawson, and for most of my life, people have decided I am the kind of man who will just sit there and take whatever is given to him. I am quiet. I listen more than I speak. I worked as an engineer for decades, and that taught me to see structures under the surface, where weight really sits, where pressure builds up, where something will crack if you keep pushing it. For a long time, I watched those cracks form in my son's life, one small moment at a time, and I did nothing. That changed on the night of the family dinner at my son's condo. I arrived 10 minutes early, as I always do. Alex texted that Mia's parents were already there, which did not surprise me. Victor and Elena like to be first, so they can settle into the center of the room before anyone else arrives. When I stepped into the hallway, I could hear low voices through the door and the sound of cutlery already on the table. Alex opened the door with that anxious half-smile he gives when he wants things to go well. His shirt collar was a little too tight. He said his father-in-law had brought a special bottle and wanted to start early. I told him it sounded nice and stepped inside. The condo looked good. Open-plan living and dining space, light wood floor, modern chairs. My eyes went to the sofa under the big window. I remembered sitting in a bank conference room the year before, us signing papers so they could afford this place. I had called it temporary help. I had asked them not to tell anyone where the money came from. It was for them, not for show. Now there were framed photos on the walls. Most of them showed Mia and her parents at events. One big frame held a picture from the first time both families met at an expensive steakhouse. In that photo, Victor sat at the center of the table with his arm thrown wide, smiling like the host of a show. I was at the edge of the frame, shoulders slightly turned, as if I was already on my way out. Mia greeted me in the dining area. She gave me a quick hug that did not wrinkle her dress and told me she was glad I could make it. She said that her father had prepared something special tonight, a kind of talk about plans for the future. She said this with the tone of someone introducing a guest speaker at a company event. Victor sat at the head of the table. He rose when I came in, shook my hand, and told me it was good that I was there to see where the young couple was heading. He had a way of taking up space with his gestures, as if every room was his boardroom. Elena smiled softly from her seat next to him and said she hoped I was hungry. The table was already set. There were glasses, plates, and a large dish in the center. A bottle stood near Victor's seat. He nodded at it and explained that it was a special bottle he had saved, and it felt right to open it now that his daughter and her husband were really starting their future. I took the chair at the opposite end of the table, next to Alex. It was the position that naturally fell to me. Victor talked about the traffic, about some trouble with drivers at his logistics company, about an upcoming meeting. He spoke loudly enough that no one else needed to fill the space. As we ate, the conversation slowly turned to money. It always did. Victor began to talk about the hotel reception that was coming up, the big event that he was planning for friends, family, and business partners. He explained how much it cost, how much work he was putting in, how important it was that everything looked perfect. Then he looked at Alex and said that this was the kind of responsibility a man needed to understand. He said that sometimes younger men did not realize who carried the real weight, who made things possible behind the scenes. I could feel Alex's shoulder tighten next to mine. He said carefully that he appreciated everything the Romeros were doing and that he and Mia were also trying to contribute what they could. He mentioned his salary, his savings, and how they were planning their own budget. Victor laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, but it carried a message. He said Alex was doing fine for someone in his field, but that a real provider needed to think bigger and sometimes accept guidance from those who had already proved themselves. Mia joined in. She said her father just wanted Alex to see the bigger picture. She repeated a phrase I had heard from Victor before. She said that real strength meant stepping under a larger load and carrying it without complaint. She said this while she looked at her father, not at her husband. I listened. I ate slowly. I did not interrupt. The talk changed to work. Victor began to describe an opportunity for Alex at Romero Logistics. He painted it as a favor. He said there was an opening that Alex could fill, a role that would let him learn from someone who knew how to lead. He said that the job Alex had now was comfortable but small, and that he needed to be pushed out of his comfort zone. Alex explained, in a careful tone, that he liked his current position. He said he had a long-term project there and that he wanted to grow in software, not logistics. He said he did not want to mix family and work. and the temperature in the room shifted. It was slight but clear. Victor's smile did not disappear, but it stopped reaching his eyes. He set his glass down a little too neatly. He told Alex that he was being short-sighted. He said that a man who refused to take advice from someone with more experience was refusing to grow. Mia's face tightened. She told Alex that her father only wanted what was best. She asked him why he was being stubborn. She reminded him how much her father had done for them, especially with the reception costs. She said that it would mean a lot if Alex showed some trust. Alex looked down at his plate. He said he was grateful for everything, but he did not want to join the company. He repeated that he wanted to stand on his own feet in his own field. Silence stretched across the table for a moment. The sound of cutlery and glasses from neighboring apartments came faintly through the walls. Victor pushed his chair back and stood up. He walked around the table with slow steps, as if considering something important. He came to stand behind Alex's chair. I could see his hand resting on the back of it, fingers spread wide. He leaned down. His voice dropped, but everyone could still hear him. He told Alex that sometimes a young man needed a firm reminder of his place in the structure of a family. He said that this was about respect, about knowing who carried the main load. Then he put his hand on Alex's shoulder. It was not gentle. He pressed down and pushed him back toward the chair just as Alex was half rising. The motion was not enough to cause any real harm, but there was no way to see it as friendly. It was a push to put him back where Victor believed he belonged. Alex froze. His face went blank. His hand tightened around his fork, then slowly relaxed. Mia gave a small, nervous laugh. She said that maybe this would finally teach Alex a lesson about listening to her father. She said it in that half-joking tone people use when they mean every word. Elena stared at her plate. She did not speak. I felt a cold wave run through my chest. People talk about anger as something hot, but mine did not feel like that. It was quiet and very clear. I looked at my son. I saw the way he pulled his shoulders slightly inward, as if he was trying to disappear inside his own body. I saw the way he avoided my eyes, as if he was ashamed. That was the point when something in me shifted. It was not the push alone, it was the pattern behind it. Years of small cuts, small jokes, small public corrections. The way my own support had been quietly erased, while Victor kept building the story that everything good in this young couple's life came from him. I set my napkin down. I told them I needed some air and that I would be right back. I spoke in an even tone. I did not raise my voice or throw anything. I did not explain myself. No one tried to stop me. I walked out of the dining area, through the living room, past the sofa that my money had helped to place in front of that window. The condo door closed behind me with a soft click. The hallway outside was cooler and quieter. I stood there for a moment, breathing in and out. I took my phone from my pocket. The screen lit up and showed a list of missed calls and messages, work reminders, a note from my ex-wife, a small message from Alex from earlier in the day. Then I saw a name that instantly calmed me further. Priya. We had not spoken in a while. She was my lawyer and an old friend. She understood structures. She helped me set up the trust for Alex. Helped me with my small but precise investments. I scrolled to her contact and stared at it. I realized that for years I had told her to prepare things just in case, and then never used any of it. I had believed that people would come to their senses on their own. Inside the condo I could hear voices again, low and muffled. Victor's tone carried that familiar mix of pride and irritation. Mia's voice followed, lighter, trying to smooth things over. My son's voice was the quietest. I pressed the call button. As the phone rang in my ear, I felt my heartbeat settle into a steady, slow rhythm. When Priya answered, I greeted her calmly and told her that I needed to review some old documents about a trust, a condo, and a certain investment in a logistics company. That night, after I ended the call with Priya and went back inside, I stayed mostly quiet. I finished my food, listened to Victor talk, and watched Alex try to make everyone comfortable again. I did not bring up the push. I did not talk about the call. I knew that nothing I said at that table would change how Victor saw himself. Later, when the dishes were done and I had said goodbye, I drove home on almost empty streets. The city lights slid past the windshield in soft lines. In the quiet of the car, my mind replayed the scene from the dinner again and again. Victor's hand on Alex's shoulder, the slight force of the push, Mia's little laugh. When I stepped into my house, the familiar smell of coffee and old wood greeted me. My home is not large, but it is mine, built on careful decisions over many years. I left my keys in the bowl by the door, walked into the kitchen, and set the kettle on without thinking. I did not turn on the television. I did not put on music. I sat at the table with a mug and looked at the blank notepad in front of me. The pen lay beside it, untouched. My thoughts drifted back not only to the dinner, but to the first time I met Victor and his family. It had been at that expensive steakhouse in the photo on Alex's wall. The memory came back in sharp detail, as if I was sitting there again. Back then, I had still been working full-time. Alex had called me and told me that Mia's parents wanted to meet properly. He sounded nervous and proud at the same time. I had put on my best jacket and gone to the restaurant, feeling hopeful. The waiter had led me to a private room. Victor was already seated at the center of the long table, talking loudly to a server about wine. He greeted me with a big smile and a firm handshake and spoke in a warm tone. He told me that he was glad to finally meet the man who raised Alex. During that dinner, Victor talked a lot about his company. He described how he had grown Romero Logistics from almost nothing, how he led a team of drivers and managers, how he handled crises. He liked to tell stories where he was the one who stepped in and saved the day. Every now and then, he compared his work to mine. He said that engineers were important, but that real risk lay in running a business. He said that people who stayed in stable, quiet jobs did not understand what it felt like to be fully responsible for others' paychecks. He did not say this in a cruel way, but it was clear he saw his path as the higher one. Alex sat beside Mia, clearly impressed by Victor's energy. He tried to join the talk now and then, but Victor often cut in and continued his own story. Mia seemed used to it. She smiled at her father and repeated some of his phrases about hard work and real leadership. I remember that when the bill came, Victor made a performance of taking it. He told everyone that he would handle it, as it was his pleasure to host. I reached for my wallet, more out of habit than any real need, but he waved a hand and laughed. He said that he could manage this one, and that next time we could find a way to balance things. The next time never came in that form. The pattern was set from that night. Victor saw himself as the main provider, the leader, the center of any table he sat at. I saw it, but I did not challenge it. At the time, I thought it did not matter, as long as Alex and Mia were happy. A few months after that dinner, Victor invited Alex to visit the Romero Logistics office. Mia asked me to come along too, because she thought it would be nice to see where her father worked. I agreed. The office had glass walls and framed magazine covers in the entrance. Victor walked us through each section with pride, pointing out maps, schedules, and photos from hard winters and busy seasons. He talked about fuel costs and driver shortages, about trucks stuck on snowy roads, about deals that almost failed. At one point, he brought us into the boardroom. It had a long table and a view over the industrial area. He sat at the head chair, almost out of habit, and told Alex that this was where real decisions were made. He said that one day someone with the right drive could sit there and lead. The way he said it made it clear he was not talking about me. There was a moment during that visit when Victor and I were alone at the coffee machine in the hallway. He thanked me for raising a polite son. He said that Alex had good values, even if he needed some pushing to become more ambitious. He spoke as if this pushing was his job now. I remember that I smiled and changed the subject. I did not tell him how many nights I had stayed late at my own office so I could keep food on the table and still show up at Alex's school events. I did not tell him about times when I had quietly taken pay cuts during lean months so that my team could keep their jobs. Victor did not ask. He was not interested in my stories. Later that year, Romero Logistics had a difficult period. Fuel prices jumped, one large client left, and some loans came due at the same time. I heard about it almost by accident from a friend who followed local business news. Soon after, Victor called me. His tone was still confident, but I could hear strain beneath it. He said that the company was going through a temporary tight spot and that he was looking for investors who understood the local market. He mentioned that someone with a steady background in engineering and long-term planning would be a good partner. I listened. I asked questions. I could tell that he was not used to being on the side of the table where help was needed. In the end, I agreed to put up some money. It was not a small amount for me, but I had been careful over the years. I viewed it as a mixed thing, support for my son's future in this family and a simple, neutral investment. I did not want to meddle in his business, so I met with my lawyer, Priya. She insisted we put everything in writing. She helped draft an agreement that gave me a modest share in the company and some specific protections. There was a part about conduct and reputation. It stated that leaders had a duty to avoid public behavior that could harm the company's image and relationships. At the time, it felt like a technical point, just one more clause among many. Victor signed the documents quickly. He was relieved to solve his financial problem. He said that he knew how to run his company and that this was only a bridge through a rough period. He treated the agreement as a formality. I did not brag about this investment. I did not tell Alex that I now held a share in his father-in-law's company. I thought it would only create tension. I trusted that everyone would act like adults and that my quiet involvement would stay just that, quiet. As Alex and Mia's relationship grew more serious, new financial questions came up. They began to talk about buying a place together. Their rent was high, and they wanted to start building something of their own. Alex came to me one evening with a worried look and a spreadsheet. He showed me numbers, interest rates, and savings. He said that they were close, but not close enough. He said that Mia's father wanted them to wait for the market to cool, but they felt that this condo was the right place. He asked very carefully if I could help. I made him sit down and breathe. I told him that I would help if it made sense on paper. We looked at the numbers together. Then I told him that I could provide the down payment as a temporary bridge. I said that we would structure it in a way that kept the condo safe for him and Mia in the long term. Again, I went to Priya. She helped set up a trust with Alex as the main person it protected. The trust would hold the condo and make sure that if anything strange happened, Alex would not lose his home because of someone else's decisions. When we sat in the bank conference room to sign the papers, Victor was there too. He talked to the loan officer about interest rates and market trends as if he was leading the whole process. He acted like my presence was a nice extra detail. He did not ask about the trust. He did not read all the papers. He signed where they pointed. Alex thanked everyone, eyes bright. For him, this was the start of a stable life with the woman he loved. For Victor, it was another chance to talk about responsibility and leadership. For me, it was another layer of structure, another quiet support beam under my son's life. I had never planned to use any of these structures against anyone. They were meant as safety nets. But as the months went by, I began to see how the patterns in this family were forming. Mia started to speak more like her father and less like the young woman who had first told me she was impressed with Alex's kindness. At family events, she would correct Alex in front of others when he spoke about his plans. She would repeat Victor's phrases about real providers and serious men. Victor never missed a chance to remind people that he was funding the big reception, that he had opened doors, that he was offering Alex a path into his company. He spoke as if my role was to watch from the side and be grateful that my son had been accepted into such a strong family. Each time, I chose silence. I told myself that picking fights would only hurt Alex. I told myself that he needed to navigate his own marriage. I thought that if I stayed calm and consistent, everyone would eventually see that respect can be quiet and steady, not loud and demanding. But then came the dinner at the condo, and the push, and that cold wave in my chest. Back at my kitchen table that night, I looked at the notepad and finally picked up the pen. I wrote down the names of 3 things: the trust, the condo, and Romero Logistics. I drew lines between them like an engineer mapping forces on a frame. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a new message in the family group chat that included me, Alex, Mia, and the Romeros. Victor had written that he was excited about the upcoming hotel reception. He said that he would show Alex what real responsibility looked like, and that this event would be a lesson in how serious men handle life. I read the message twice. Then I placed the phone face down next to the notepad and continued to draw lines. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. The light outside was still soft, and the house felt very still. I lay there for a moment, listening to the quiet, and tried to decide if the dinner had been a passing moment or a clear line. My mind kept going back to Alex's face when Victor pushed him back into his chair. Every time I saw it, the answer felt the same. I went to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat at the table again. The notepad from the night before was still there, with 3 words: trust, condo, Romero. The lines I had drawn between them looked simple, but I knew each line stood for years of decisions. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Alex's name. I hesitated for a second, knowing that a hard talk could strain things between us. Then I reminded myself that avoiding tension had not protected him so far. I called and asked if we could meet near his office for a quick coffee before his workday began. He sounded surprised, but agreed. He asked if everything was all right. I told him that I wanted to check in about the dinner. I kept my voice calm so he would not panic. The coffee shop near his workplace was quiet at that hour. A few people tapped on laptops. A barista wiped the counter with slow movements. When Alex walked in, he looked tired. There were faint shadows under his eyes, and his smile was weaker than usual. He sat across from me, and for a moment we just held our cups without speaking. I finally asked him how he felt about the night before. He sighed and said that things had gotten a little intense, but that it was not a big deal. He said that his father-in-law could be strong in his style and that the push was not really serious. He called it a gesture, just Victor's way of making a point. I listened and asked him if he had wanted to stand up when he did. He said that he had been about to leave the table for a moment or go get something from the kitchen. He added that maybe Victor had thought he was storming off and just wanted to keep him at the table. I asked him if that explanation felt true to him, deep down. He looked away toward the window and did not answer for a few seconds. Then he said that he did not want a fight between his family and Mia's. He said that Victor had done a lot for them. He mentioned the reception, the planning, the work. He also mentioned, quietly, that Victor was starting to talk again about bringing him into Romero Logistics. He said that Mia thought it would show trust if he at least tried it. He said that he felt pressure from all sides and did not want to seem ungrateful. I told him that I understood not wanting to start a conflict. I said that I had spent many years doing the same. I said that I was proud of his wish to be fair. Then I told him that being fair did not mean accepting being pushed around, especially not in front of the whole family. He rubbed his face with both hands. He said that he knew the push had not been right, but that calling it out would cause a big scene. He said that maybe this was just how things would be now, and that he could handle it. He added that Mia had grown up with Victor's style and barely noticed it. I asked him if he wanted his future children to grow up thinking that this was normal. That question made him go quiet. He stared at the table and did not answer. Then, because I felt we needed some practical ground, I asked him if he remembered how the condo had been set up. I reminded him of the meeting at the bank, the talk about the trust, and the idea that the condo should be a safe place for him and Mia. He said that he remembered some of it, but that a lot of the details had passed over his head at the time. He had just been happy that it worked. I told him that I had not set those things up by accident. I said that I had wanted him to have something that could not easily be used to control him. I did not go into detail. I only told him that the structures around him were stronger than he thought. He looked up and asked if I was planning something. He sounded worried. He said he did not want a war between me and Victor because he would be in the middle. I told him that I was not planning a war. I said I was planning clarity. I used simple words. I said that I was tired of watching him be treated like a small child, and that if anyone thought they could use money or status to control him, they had misunderstood how things were built. He tried to ask for more detail, but I did not give it. I told him that for now, he should focus on his work and on being honest with himself about what felt right and what did not. I promised him that whatever I did, I would do it through the proper channels. When we parted, he hugged me longer than usual. He did not say much, but his shoulders felt tense under my hands. On the way home, I let my mind drift back again to the bank conference room from when they bought the condo. I remembered the thick folder of documents on the desk, the pen marks, the careful explanations from the loan officer. I remembered how Victor had talked loudly about market timing and interest, as if the whole structure depended on him. But I also remembered something else, the separate set of papers Priya had prepared. These papers were not about the bank's loan. They were about the trust. They made sure that if certain events happened, or if certain conditions were met, the condo would be shielded for Alex no matter what. At the time, Victor had been focused on the main loan agreement. He had asked a few questions, but he had not asked about every document on the table. Some he signed as a matter of routine, others he did not sign at all because they were not about him. He had assumed that his visible role at the bank was the whole picture. I had seen this pattern in him even then. He liked surfaces and symbols, big dinners, large bills, public toasts. He did not look deeply at structures that did not flatter him directly. A similar thing had happened when I invested in Romero Logistics years ago. I remembered sitting with Priya in her office as she went through the planned agreement line by line. She had insisted on certain protections. She had added a clause about conduct and reputation. She had explained that partners had the right to act if a leader's behavior put the company at risk in the eyes of clients or partners. When we took that agreement to Victor, he skimmed it. He focused on the numbers, the amount, the timing, the percentage. He saw enough to feel secure, then signed. He joked that lawyers like to make things complicated, but that he trusted me. Now, sitting in my living room years later, I could see that Priya had prepared stronger foundations than either of us had expected to need. I called her again that afternoon and asked if I could come by her office in person. She said that she had already pulled my file when I called the night before. She sounded curious, but not surprised. She has always known that I do not call her without a serious reason. Her office was on the 6th floor of a quiet building downtown. The reception area smelled faintly of paper and coffee. She greeted me with a small smile and led me into a room lined with shelves and cabinets. On the desk in front of her was a stack of folders with my name on them. She asked me to tell her, in my own words, what had happened at the dinner. I described the scene slowly. The talk, the pressure, the push, and Mia's comment about teaching Alex a lesson. I told her how Alex had tried to make excuses for it in the coffee shop that morning and how tired he had looked. Priya listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back and was quiet for a moment. Then she reminded me of the structures we had put in place, the trust with Alex as main person, the way the condo papers were written, the stake in Romero Logistics, and the conduct clause in the shareholder agreement. She said that all of these had been designed to give me options if things ever went in a direction that threatened Alex's stability or dignity. She said that now, from what I described, it sounded like those conditions were being tested. I asked her what could be done. She did not answer with simple phrases like fight or attack. She spoke in terms of notices, meetings, votes, and triggers. She said that if a pattern of harmful public behavior could be shown, including this dinner incident, it could justify actions under the agreement with Romero Logistics. She added that the trust could be adjusted to make the condo even more secure for Alex in a way that removed any chance of it being used as a tool of control. I told her that I did not want to do anything rushed or unfair. I said that I did not want to strike out of anger. I only wanted to make sure that my son could not be pushed into a position where he felt he had no choice but to obey another man's orders because of money or housing. She nodded and said that careful action was exactly what the structures were made for. She suggested that we gather some proof. She mentioned messages, videos, and any other signs of a pattern. She told me that if I decided to move forward, we should time things so that any formal changes would be in place before the large reception Victor was planning. When I left her office, the air outside felt sharper, as if the world had come into focus. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like someone watching from the side. I felt like someone who had been quietly standing on solid ground while others danced on a weak platform. That evening, back at home, I went to the hallway closet and took a small key from the top shelf. I knelt down, moved a pair of old shoes aside, and pulled out the metal safe from the back corner. I set it on the floor, turned the dial with calm hands, and opened it. Inside were a few important things: some savings, a small box of personal items, and a thick folder labeled with a simple word, Romero. I took the folder out and carried it to the table in the living room. On the wall above the table hung a calendar. The date of the Grand Hotel reception was already circled from weeks ago. I looked from the circle on the calendar to the folder on the table and understood that the two were now connected in a way Victor did not see yet. I spent that night with the folder open in front of me and the calendar in my line of sight. I did not rush to read every page. Instead, I turned each one slowly, like someone checking the beams of a bridge, the agreements, the signatures, the stamped dates. Nothing here was new to me, but I was seeing it with different eyes. This was not just paper, it was structure. It was the frame under the walls Victor liked to lean on. The next day, I called Priya again and told her I wanted a longer meeting. She suggested we sit down with everything laid out at once: the trust, the condo documents, and the shareholder agreement. Her voice was calm. She did not push me to act, but she did not tell me to forget about it either. She said that when people show you how they see you and how they see your child, you should listen. At her office, she had already arranged 3 neat stacks on the table. She went through the trust first. She reminded me that we had built it to protect Alex, not to threaten anyone. It was there to make sure that, no matter what happened around him, he would not lose his home or find himself suddenly without a base. She pointed to a section I vaguely remembered but had not paid much attention to at the time. It spoke about harmful behavior by people tied to the beneficiary through marriage or close relation. It did not list exact acts, but it described patterns: repeated humiliation, public disrespect, conduct that created pressure or fear. If such patterns were clear, the trust allowed certain changes to be made, always in favor of Alex's stability. Then she moved to the condo documents. She showed me how the title was held, how the trust and the bank interacted, how any attempt by outside parties to claim control would trigger automatic protections. Victor had never truly stood inside this structure. He had only pushed against the surface. Finally, she opened the folder about Romero Logistics. I saw my signature next to Victor's, in ink that had now turned slightly dull with time. She read aloud a key section about leadership conduct. It spoke of the duty of major leaders to avoid actions that could harm the company's public image or relationships with partners and family stakeholders. It also gave a process. If such conduct became clear, a board meeting could be called and changes could be made. I listened and felt something settle inside me. For years, I had treated all this as background, like emergency support beams hidden inside walls. Now I understood that the design was not only for worst-case disasters. It was also there for moments when someone, like Victor, forgot that power comes with boundaries. Priya asked if any of Victor's behavior had been recorded. She said that in her experience, modern family events often left a digital trail. I told her I was not sure, but that I had seen phones out at the dinner. She suggested that if a recording of the push existed, it would be a clear example of the pattern we had discussed. I left her office with a list of tasks, not orders. She told me to collect what I could: messages, videos, any written comments that showed how Victor spoke to and about Alex. She said she would speak quietly with one other person connected to the company, someone who could help if a board meeting became necessary. I did not need her to say Robert's name. I knew who she meant. A few days later, I went to Romero Logistics. On the surface, nothing had changed. Trucks moved in and out of the yard. Employees walked in and out of the building with clipboards and tablets. The front desk staff greeted me politely. Victor was out at some client meeting, which suited me. I had not come to see him. Robert met me in the boardroom. He was a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes, a few years older than me. We had met when I first invested. He had always treated me as an equal, not as a piece in Victor's story. He asked how I was and what brought me in. I told him, in simple, measured words, about the dinner at the condo. I described the conversation, the pressure about the job, the way Victor had stood behind Alex, the hand on the shoulder, the push, and Mia's remark. I did not dramatize it. I simply set the facts in order. Robert sat very still while I spoke. When I finished, he rubbed his forehead and said that he wished he could say he was surprised. He told me that over the years he had heard workers talk quietly about Victor's temper. He said that most of the time it was kept inside the company walls, but lately Victor had been more careless even in public. I mentioned the agreement and the conduct clause. Robert nodded and said he remembered it. He said that at the time he had thought it was more for show, but now he could see its use. He did not rush to promises, but he said that if clear proof existed, he would support a formal discussion. We agreed that I would not talk to Victor about this directly. There was no point in trying to argue with someone who saw every question as an insult. Instead, I would focus on collecting what Priya needed. Robert would, in his own circle, listen for further signs of concern and prepare to act if the board was called. A few evenings later, I was invited again to Alex and Mia's condo. This time it was for a casual planning session about the upcoming hotel reception. Elena wanted to discuss seating arrangements and food. I decided to go, not to argue, but to observe. When I arrived, the mood was lighter. Victor was not there. He was at some late meeting. Elena moved between the kitchen and the table with a notepad, talking about guests and tables. Mia talked about flower choices and colors. Alex smiled and nodded, trying to be helpful. At one point, I mentioned gently that the last dinner had been difficult. I said that seeing someone lay a hand on my son that way was not something I could easily forget. I did not raise my voice. I simply stated it as a fact. Mia frowned and said that her father had only meant to keep Alex from walking out in the middle of an important talk. She said that sometimes strong gestures were needed to keep order. She added that Alex could take it, that he was not made of glass. Elena looked uncomfortable. She did not defend the push directly. She said that Victor had a heavy way of showing concern and that maybe things had gone a bit far. She said she hoped we could all move past it for the sake of the reception. As we spoke, I noticed a small cousin of Mia's sitting on the sofa, scrolling through his phone with headphones around his neck. Now and then he glanced up and smiled at something on the screen. At one point, when the room went quieter, I heard a familiar line of speech coming weakly from his phone speaker. I turned my head slightly and saw, on his screen, the image of the dinner table. It was the moment when Victor stood behind Alex. I saw my own face at the far end, then the hand on Alex's shoulder, the small push, and Mia leaning in with her lesson remark. The cousin had replayed it and was laughing quietly. I walked over and asked in a gentle tone what he was watching. He looked embarrassed and said that he had just filmed a funny moment from the last dinner. He said that everyone filmed everything these days and that it was just for private laughs. I told him that I would like a copy. I did not threaten him or raise my voice. I simply said that adults needed to talk about what had happened and that having the exact record would help. He hesitated, then nodded and sent the clip to my phone. Later that night, at home, I watched the video again. It was not long, but it showed more than words could. The way Victor's hand pressed down, the way Alex's shoulders tensed, the expression on Mia's face when she made her remark, the way Elena stared at her plate, my own stillness at the far end of the table. I forwarded the clip to Priya with a short message. "This is the dinner incident, exactly as it happened." She responded a few minutes later, saying that she had received it and would store it carefully. She also said that it confirmed everything I had described. A few days after that, we had the rehearsal at the community hall. It was a shared space with a small stage and rows of folding chairs. The acoustics were sharp. Every word seemed to bounce off the walls twice. Victor was fully in his element. He walked around giving instructions about where people should stand, when the music should start, how the speeches should be ordered. He spoke as if the entire event existed only because of his planning. Alex followed directions, moving where he was told, holding props, nodding. Mia stayed close to her father, checking lists and nodding at his suggestions. Now and then, Victor made small comments in front of everyone about how Alex needed reminders, how this was good practice for real responsibility. People laughed, some awkwardly, some with real amusement. I stood near the back and watched. I looked at the faces. Some smiled politely, some looked down, some rolled their eyes when Victor turned away. I noted who seemed uneasy when he pushed Alex verbally, and who enjoyed it. It told me more than any long conversation could. At the end of the rehearsal, while people gathered their things, my phone buzzed. It was a new email notification. The subject line was short but heavy. Extraordinary Board Meeting, Romero Logistics. I opened it and saw that the meeting was scheduled for the morning of the hotel reception. The topic was listed as Leadership, Conduct, and Governance. The message was sent to all board members, including me. Robert's name appeared at the bottom, alongside the company's legal advisor. I slid the phone back into my pocket. Around me, people were still talking about flowers and seating charts. Victor was giving someone instructions about lighting. He had no idea that, on a different level of the structure he loved to show off, the frame had already started to shift. In the days after the rehearsal and the board meeting email, my life looked almost normal from the outside. I went to the store, cleaned the house, replied to a few work messages from old colleagues. Still, there was a new rhythm under everything, like a steady drum I could always hear even when the room was quiet. One evening, I sat at my kitchen table again with the folder open. This time, I did not study every line. I already knew what was there. Instead, I made a simple list on a fresh sheet of paper. At the top, I wrote the date of the hotel reception. Under it, I wrote 3 short lines: trust, condo, company. I thought about Alex. I pictured him at that table, his shoulders under Victor's hand. I thought about all the small moments before that, when he had bent himself into shapes to keep the peace. I understood the fear that drove him. I also knew that if no one drew a line, the pressure would only grow. The next morning, I called Priya and told her I was ready to move from talking to acting. I said I did not want revenge. I wanted boundaries. I told her that my main aim was simple. My son should never feel that his housing or his work depended on a man who treated him like a child in public. She said that this was a clear goal. She told me to come to her office with my identification and some time to spare. There were documents to sign and notices to prepare. Before I left the house, I stood for a moment in the hallway and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a man with gray in his hair and lines on his face. I also saw something steadier in my eyes than I had seen in a long time. I did not look heroic. I looked decided. At Priya's office, she had already laid out a small stack of papers. She walked me through them one by one in simple terms. There were adjustments to the trust, shifting more control directly into Alex's hands. There were instructions about how the condo would be held and what would happen if anyone tried to use it as leverage. There were also letters connected to my shares in Romero Logistics, ready to be used if the board meeting went the way she expected. She explained what each signature meant. She did not rush. She reminded me that once these were in place, it would be difficult for anyone to undo them without serious cause. She asked if I was sure. I thought of Alex at the coffee shop, rubbing his face with both hands and saying that maybe this was just how things would be now. I nodded and said that I was sure. We took the documents to the courthouse and then to a small notary office nearby. The lobby was plain: white walls, plastic chairs, a few plants in simple pots. People waited quietly with their own papers and worries. When my turn came, I stepped up to the counter, presented my identification, and watched as the notary stamped the documents with slow, steady motions. Each stamp felt like the sound of a door closing gently but firmly. After we were done, Priya and I stood for a moment outside the building. The sky was light gray. The wind was cool. She told me that once the board meeting took place, things would move quickly. She said that by the time the reception started at the hotel, the legal picture around Victor and the company could be very different. I asked her again if this was fair. I wanted to hear it out loud. She told me that fairness was not about keeping everyone comfortable, but about matching actions with real consequences. She reminded me that Victor had enjoyed the image of leadership for many years. Now he would get to see what leadership also meant on paper, not just at a dinner table. On the morning of the board meeting, I rose before sunrise. I dressed in a simple shirt and jacket and drove to the Romero Logistics office. The parking lot was half full. The building looked the same as always. Inside, the receptionist nodded and let me through with a polite greeting. The boardroom felt slightly different that day. There were more suits around the table, more quiet tension. Victor sat at the head, trying to look relaxed, but his jaw was tight. He gave me a quick nod when I entered, then turned back to a conversation with another member. Robert sat on the opposite side, flipping through a folder. I will not go into every detail of that meeting. That belongs more to corporate minutes than to a family story. It is enough to say that the conduct clause we had once treated as a formality was now read aloud in full. It is enough to say that messages, complaints, and the video of the dinner were mentioned. The video itself was not played, but everyone knew it existed. Victor tried to defend himself, at first with jokes, then with irritation. He said that family matters should not mix with company decisions. The legal advisor reminded him that it was his choice to use public family events as stages for his own image. He reminded him that public is a wide word in a world full of phones. In the end, the board did what the agreement allowed. A vote was taken. The result was clear enough. Victor's role changed in that room. He was still part of the company, but his position at the top, the one he loved to show off, shifted away from him. When the meeting was over, Victor remained seated, staring at the papers in front of him. Robert stood and came over to me. He said quietly that he knew this could not have been easy, but that it was necessary. He added that the company would likely be calmer under shared leadership. I left the building without looking back at Victor. That part was not about hurting him in front of his staff. It was about correcting the structure he had been leaning on for too long. On my way home, my phone rang. It was Alex. His voice sounded tense. He said he had heard that something was happening at Romero Logistics, that his father-in-law was upset, and hinting that some people were trying to undermine him. Alex asked if I knew anything. I did not lie. I told him that the board had met, as the agreement allowed, and that certain decisions were made based on patterns of behavior. I did not describe every step. I did tell him that I had supported those decisions because they were in line with the rules Victor himself had accepted years ago. Alex was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said that he was afraid this would make everything worse. He said that Victor could pull back his support for the reception. He said that Mia would be torn if her father felt attacked. I told him that nothing in the decisions we had made touched the wedding or the reception directly. I said that whatever Victor chose to do in response would show everyone how he really saw those events, as celebrations of love or as stages for his own pride. I reminded Alex that I had promised to act through proper channels, not through sudden scenes. In the days that followed, messages went back and forth in the family group chat. Victor said little there. Mia wrote more. She talked about stress at the office, about her father being under pressure, about how important it was that the reception go smoothly. She did not mention the push or the board meeting directly. I answered her messages in a measured way. I said that I would be there on the day, that I loved my son, and that I wanted the event to be peaceful. I did not explain anything else. The time for explanations would come when everyone was in the same room. On the morning of the reception, I woke with a clear head. I shaved carefully, put on my suit, and checked the contents of the slim folder on my kitchen table. Inside it were only a few pages, confirmation of the trust changes, notes from Priya about the condo, and a copy of the notice about the board decision. I did not expect to show all of them, but I liked knowing they were with me, like an engineer likes knowing where the main bolts are. Before I left, I made myself a small breakfast and sat at the table one last time. The house was quiet. I thought about Alex as a child, running in the yard, falling and getting back up. I thought about all the times I had told him that being strong did not mean being the loudest person in the room. It meant knowing what you stood on and what you would not accept. Then I stood, took the folder, and left the house. The hotel lobby was full of movement. Guests in formal clothes moved in small groups, greeting each other, checking their phones, laughing. Staff walked around with trays and checklists. Soft music played from speakers hidden in corners. I arrived a little early and stood to one side, near a tall plant and a row of chairs. From there, I could see the entrance to the ballroom. The doors were closed, but I could hear the muffled sound of preparations inside. Alex found me there. He looked sharp in his suit, but his eyes were restless. He asked if I was all right. I told him that I was. I asked how he felt. He said that he was excited and nervous at the same time. He added in a lower voice that Victor had been in a hard mood all morning. There had been phone calls, raised tones behind closed doors, muttered comments about loyalty. I asked if Victor had said anything specific to him. Alex said that his father-in-law had reminded him how much this event cost and how much pressure he was under. He had hinted that if Alex did not support him, he would look ungrateful in front of everyone. I told Alex that gratitude was not the same as obedience. I told him that today might be difficult, but that some truths needed to be placed where everyone could see them. I did not go further. I put a hand on his shoulder for a brief moment. This time, there was no pressure in the touch, only a steady presence. After a while, staff began to guide people toward the ballroom doors. The music inside shifted to a softer tone. Guests formed a loose line, chatting as they waited. Some held their phones ready for photos and videos. The air felt charged, like the moments before a storm, but my mind was calm. We entered the ballroom. It was large, with high ceilings and lights that made the tables shine. A small stage stood at one end with a microphone on a stand. People moved toward their places, checking name cards and adjusting chairs. I took my seat at a table near the front, close to where the families would be. The folder rested by my side, closed. Around the room, I saw faces I knew, and many that I did not. Some were family, some were clients and partners of the Romero company. All of them were about to watch the same scene. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone. He tapped it lightly and the sound echoed through the room. The music dropped to a low background hum. Conversations faded until only a soft murmur remained. The host smiled and began to speak about the joy of the day, the union of two families, the coming speeches. Then he said that it was time to hear from the fathers of the couple. He asked everyone to give their full attention and, if they wished, to capture the moment on their phones. Around the room, screens lit up and rose in many hands like a second set of eyes. Victor went first. He rose from his chair with the ease of someone who had stood in front of many rooms like this. He straightened his jacket, took the microphone from the stand, and let his gaze move over the guests. People quieted. The screens in their hands glowed like a field of small lights. He thanked everyone for coming. He spoke about family, about hard work, about how proud he was to see his daughter marry a good man. He talked about the early days of his company and the rough years when, in his words, he had carried everything on his back. He talked about the hotel, the food, the music, the guests from far away. Then he turned slightly toward Alex. He said that when a young man joins a strong family, he must be ready to accept guidance. He said that sometimes lessons were not easy. He gave a small, knowing smile and hinted that there had been firm conversations at the dinner table in recent weeks. People laughed, not knowing what he meant. I knew. Alex knew. Mia knew. He finished with a toast to growth, discipline, and gratitude. Glasses lifted. There was polite applause. He handed the microphone back to the host and sat down, shoulders squared. He did not look at me. The host smiled again and said that now it was time to hear from the father of the groom. He waved in my direction. Chairs shifted as people turned their heads. More phones lifted. I stood up, feeling the weight of many eyes and the light folder at my side. My legs did not shake. I walked to the microphone, adjusted it a little lower, and took a breath. I started simple. I thanked everyone for coming. I said that it meant a lot to see so many people here for Alex and Mia. I spoke about Alex as a boy, about his quiet kindness, about how he always tried to keep peace between friends on the playground. Then I said that some people saw quiet as weakness. I said that when they saw someone who did not shout or push back, they thought they could push him around instead. There was a small shift in the room. The laughter faded. The screen stayed up, but hands stilled. I said that not long ago, at a family dinner, I had watched my son try to speak for himself about his career and his choices. I said that in that moment, another man at the table had stood behind him, put a hand on his shoulder, and pushed him back down into his chair in front of the family. I said that my son's wife had then thanked her father for teaching him a lesson. A murmur passed through the crowd like a low wave. On my left, I could feel Victor's gaze like a spotlight. I did not look at him yet. I said that this moment had been filmed, like so many things are these days. I said that the video showed exactly what happened, with no need for my opinion or anyone else's. I said that when I watched it later, what struck me most was not the gesture itself, but my son's face, the way his shoulders folded in, the way he seemed to shrink in his own home. I paused and let the silence sit. Then I said that after that night, I remembered some structures I had built years ago. I said that because I was an engineer, I liked to make sure that important things rested on more than one beam. I had set up a trust when Alex and Mia bought their condo. I had made sure that the down payment came from my careful savings, not from anyone's quick pride. I had invested in a company during its hard year and had insisted on clear agreements about conduct and responsibility. I did not use many technical words. I explained it in plain language. I said that the condo was not a gift from any one person's generosity. It was held inside a legal frame meant to keep it safe for Alex. I said that as of that morning, that frame had been tightened. The home Alex shared with Mia was now fully protected under the trust in a way that placed decisions in his hands. No one could threaten to pull it away or use it as pressure. I heard a soft intake of breath from Mia's side of the room. I still did not look at her. Then I turned slightly and looked toward the table where many of Victor's business guests sat. I said that years ago, when Romero Logistics had faced a hard season, I had quietly stepped in as an investor. I said that I had done so not for applause, but because I believed in stability, in work, and in my son's future with this family. I said that I had insisted, at that time, on a clause about leadership behavior, about the duty to avoid certain patterns that could harm the company's name. I told the room that an extraordinary board meeting had taken place that very morning. I said that the board had reviewed more than one incident, including the video of the dinner, messages, and older complaints. I said that the board had chosen to act under the rules Victor himself had agreed to. The room was very quiet now. Even the soft background music had stopped. Screens were still raised. Some people lowered them slowly, as if they were afraid of what the camera might catch on their own faces. I said that the board had voted to change the leadership of Romero Logistics. I explained that Victor would no longer serve as managing director. His share and presence remained, but the position he had used as a stage, the role he loved to talk about at dinners, had passed from his hands. There was no applause. There was a collective pause, as if the whole room held its breath at once. Victor reached for his phone. I saw the motion from the corner of my eye. His face turned slightly toward the screen. I knew what he was seeing: the formal notice, the signatures, the effective date, the email timestamp from that morning. At another table, Robert cleared his throat and spoke quietly to the people near him. He confirmed in simple terms that what I had just said was true. He explained that the board had acted within its rights. A few of Victor's business guests turned their heads between us as if checking a measurement twice. Only then did I turn my head and look directly at Victor. He looked back at me with a mixture of confusion and hurt pride. For once, he did not have a quick story ready. His mouth opened a little, then closed again. His free hand rested on the table, fingers pressed flat against the cloth. I did not raise my voice. I said that I had not done any of this to embarrass him. I said that I had done it because a man who uses his position to press others down, especially in front of their family, should no longer stand on the highest step without question. I said that I would never lay a hand on him, or on anyone, in anger. I said that my way of protecting my son was different. I would use the tools I understood: trusts, agreements, and boards that listened to proof rather than volume. Then I turned back to the room. I said that I wished Alex and Mia a life where respect did not depend on who could talk the loudest, but on who showed up day after day with honesty. I said that whatever happened next between families, my son would not be trapped by fear of losing his home or his future because someone else decided to teach him a lesson. I set the microphone back on its stand. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then small sounds returned: a glass shifting, a chair creaking, a quiet whisper from somewhere near the back. The music had not started again. The air felt thick. I walked down from the small stage, picked up my slim folder from the chair where I had left it, and headed toward the side exit of the ballroom. As I passed Alex's table, I felt his hand brush my sleeve for a second. I did not need to see his face to know what was in his eyes. Behind me, Victor remained seated, phone in one hand, the other still pressed flat against the tablecloth. People around him leaned in, asking questions he could not yet answer. I reached the side door, pushed it open, and stepped into the quieter corridor outside, leaving the murmur of the ballroom behind me.